Hello and welcome to John Bruns, the Family Business Guy. Today's Family Business Show edition. My special guest is Jacinta Dowsing from the Dowsing Group. Before I start, I just want to thank TEC, our sponsors for today. So thank you, TEC. TEC is a national peer mentoring organisation that does great work. So today, as I said, Jacinta Dowsing is my guest. Jacinta, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Good to have you here. Now, tell me, Dowsing Group, what do you do?
Well, clearly the name probably gives some insight into that we're a family company. Our surname we chose, Dowsing, years ago. We are in civil construction, concrete, founded on concreting. My husband was a concreter, Carl, the founder, and today we've diversified to many things, but predominantly still linked to concrete, but more civil construction.
Okay. And how many people do you employ?
Oh, it varies because obviously...
Project work?
And also lots of casuals with labouring. Definitely the projects impact what the flow of, how they're going to come and go. But I think maybe 80 to 100 today. It was probably 50, pending 50 when Carl and I moved away from operations. So the boys have taken it on to a new level. Okay,
so they're growing the business. So how did you get to here? How did you get to the business that you have today? And you said that the boys are running it now, so there's obviously been a transition there. How did you get here?
Well, it's a long journey. I could probably speak. It was a long journey that happened very quickly. So I could speak for hours and hours. I think predominantly a lot of love and passion. It's sort of like a big love story, really. I met Carl when I was 18, and he was a really hard worker. He was a concreter, sole trader at that stage, and probably didn't have any idea of his potential in some ways, and married. We had children very young. We engaged within 6 weeks, married, had children within 2 years of our marriage. So he had to work hard, and he kept working hard, and sort of just that whole evolved into a little partnership, as get a little bit of accounting advice, and then it was a company. And about 1995, we picked up our very first contract in our own name. We'd been subcontracting a lot to that point. And that was like a big game changer for us. And it varied a lot in the next 5 years, but 1995 gave us the opportunity to face growth for the first time. We had to have our own, it wasn't employees back then, it was everything was subcontracting. And I guess that also, when I look back at that time of our life, it really drove me to want to look after our people. So how did we get here? I think because we both came from regional country families, both went to boarding school. I think that helped us to be, and we're both middle children of siblings, 5 siblings each. So that sort of tells a little bit of a story if you know much about psychology, I think. And like I reflect in and look at my own upbringing, and of my 4 siblings, I'm one of 5, every one of us is in business today, as an SME. Not so much my husband's family, but where you come from has a lot to do with where you go, I think. And we were shown hard work. My dad's a farmer, he's still farming. So I think those foundations, we never ever intended to go out and be in business. It just evolved and happened, as does with a family business. You hear these, that's what I love about being connected with other families that are in business, because you hear these stories.
So you started the business with your husband, you started growing it, winning outside contracts, and that around 1995. So we're now really 25 years later.
Oh, it seems amazing.
Say the first 5 years, what did that look like?
Well, they were glory and they were tough because he was so good and he got noticed in the industry, obviously. Carl Dowsing, he was always being headhunted in, and at that time the very big fish in our very little pond kept coming to him and obviously wanted him on board as a subcontractor, which eventually he relented. We just had our 4th child, and I said to him, what will happen if you go and work there? We just won't see you, because I knew they worked, I wouldn't say like dogs, but they worked really, really hard, and he would be expected to do the same work level as in output. And he said, I know, but it's a good opportunity. And I thought, yeah, and that's where I think how we get here, we're so different. Carl is like all risk. No, I'm all detail. I just look, we're so successful together, and I just wonder if every Carl had a Jacinta and every Jacinta had a Carl, would they all get where we got to? Because we never planned it, but as we stepped through things, it just happened, and that opportunity to go where, we sort of asked me, do you think we can do this? And I'm like, well, it'll be tough on us as a family. But of course, I was an at-home mum at that time, and I had no experience. I wanted to be a lawyer and go and help people, that couldn't afford to have advice, but that never happened. So to be at home, and my aptitude for accounting and administration had to happen because everything grew. That situation with the subcontracting, we were very, very, without notice, terminated, I guess, or things got quiet, and then we were told, no, you have to go. And at that point, I really empowered Carl. I said, look, this is what you do, this is what you're good at. Why would you go and do something else? And so we had it really, really tough, which is great. Everyone needs to have it tough. We learn through the pain. And I think probably by 2000, it was extremely tough. So those 2000, 2002, we didn't have any market share. We didn't have good pricing with our suppliers. That big fish had everything. So you learn a lot through that process. And then we became big fish. So probably by 2010, we got through that. When you look at the timeline, you see the catastrophes or the crises that happen in your business life. Usually, well, for us anyway, there was always a really good thing happen after it. Go through and jot those.
So would you say that each time you faced a challenge, you learnt through that challenge?
Oh, without doubt.
And there was a
Absolutely.
great opportunity that happened that clicked for you, and you went next level then?
Without even knowing, it just sort of happened. It was like an inferno underneath you that lifts you up. Empowerment, and people say knowledge is power. I really believe it's actually empowerment. Well, of course it's power, but to be empowered and to learn from others, because we learn by our mistakes. I probably didn't know that back then, but and didn't know that we're drawn to pleasure and away from pain, but pain is what actually really empowers us to go on and achieve great things. For us, the pain of that 2000, probably 1999 to 2004, will stay with me forever. And the beautiful gift in our family, I think, is the kids, particularly the older ones, were old enough to experience that and know that. And they now run our company. So that's a really wonderful gift to have shared with them. I would never have said it back then. It was hard. But we survived, and we learnt a lot. And then we faced big problems like, how did we get here? Well, we need a lot of help because the business is a very successful business today, but we didn't have any business acumen. I couldn't even type. I didn't know how to use a type. I didn't know how to use a computer. I'd studied physics and chemistry and economics at school. I hadn't done typing class, so to go and to TAFE,
So you were a stay-at-home mum. You doing the books for the business?
As the requirement came. Until that point, Carl had been doing them. Yeah.
Okay, so Carl was really running the business as a sole trader, and as the kids got a bit older, you started to step into the roles to support him and make it work easier for him, but you also got to understand the business and your own smarts, and you would be able to talk with him about the business.
Yes, yeah. And also to encourage him, like there was times when he would be overcome by the contractual side of our business or the administration requirements. Of course, that's when I started to find a way with the 4 little children to do that.
Also wanting to do law, also as somebody that likes the detail of documentation.
Yeah, I'm pretty strong on justice. I like the truth. Yeah. So if there's untruths going around, but I also had, we were very financially challenged, and we came from very humble families, both of us. So to suddenly be earning, or not so much earning, but turning over quite large sums of money, which they were for us back then in 2003, 2004, and to be able to, teach myself how to do a bank reconciliation or learn accounting packages. We're both intelligent people, and it just was probably the aptitude of how to change on what happened. But I look back and I think, the most important thing, John, through that time, Carl we're both pretty humble, I think we are, and apart from maintaining a wonderful marriage as well through that period, because that's challenging too, and you would hear this a lot. Our love and our care for each other and our support when it came to the work zone, you just somehow turn that off and come into a home zone then. And our office was actually in my home back at that time as well. So we double challenge and 4 little kids running around that needed sport. And anyway, we got through it, and if I'd known all that was going to happen to be where I am today, I would do it again in a heartbeat. But back then it was hard. Yeah.
You don't plan these things.
Not at all.
And as much as you think, yeah, we can do some strategy together, husband and wife team growing a business, we strategise and we look forward, so that's great. But you're talking about sort of that 5 years of real difficulty, and then it sort of grew in chunks. At what stage did the kids come in, and where are you sort of today, sort of stepping away, and how is that transition happening?
Yeah, the eldest son, Bowden, he was at university, and we had moved our office into the industrial premises that we had in Welshpool at that stage. And our second son, Caleb, had come in to work on the sites with Carl, and he was just such an image of his father. Out of the 4 boys, he's the most like Carl in his physical aptitude and thirst for work. I think he was very suited to the site. But the GFC was around there, and I remember Carl really, in that next 5 years, when Caleb was in there, you know, you ask a lot of your children. I don't know if there would be another employee that I could think of in our company ever that worked as hard as he did in that period, which was, you know, and supervising men that were a lot older than him, men that had come from, in concreting, you know, there's no apprenticeships. You don't go and get trained. You usually come from some other labouring environment, or perhaps some mining trade or something, you know, like a TA or something come in. So we really got to start to train you. And footpaths, which we were specialised in then, they're even more unique in the concrete sector. A lot of concreters don't want to touch them. It's a lot below them to do concreting. And we were at that stage becoming Perth's largest footpath provider to local sector. So Caleb was already in there, Bowden was at university, and Carl was getting really tired, which I didn't know that either. I mean, he just worked so hard. And the way our business really grew in those days, he'd be on site all day working as a leader, and then 2 o'clock come in and change out of the high-vis clothes and put on some corporate clothes and then go out and market. We didn't have a marketing person or a salesperson as we do today. And you know, he's very good at, I think his values are so strong, he really did pick up a lot of work like that. And then Bowden sort of noticed that with Carl being so exhausted, the systems, we didn't have any systems, as you know, we were floundering along. And he was still living at home at Curtin University. I remember him coming and said, "Mum, I think I should come in and, you know, help." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't think so." Because I hadn't got my degree, you know, that I thought I would do. So I really wanted my kids to get their degree. And I said, "Well, do you think you could do a bit external?" And anyway, he came into the business at that point. And Luke and Sam, the youngest ones, were still at school. So, and then the way Luke, he had finished, graduated, had a bet with his father about threshold of pain and who could stand so much pain at the dinner table one night, and so he came to have his gap year in the company and just excelled and flourished and was such a wonderful concreter and a little leader that he has stayed as well. So we did all the things wrong really, like, you know, your kids really shouldn't come back into your business that young. And so by the time we got to young Samuel, it was like, you are not coming back in here. You are going out to get you know, some other perspective before you come back in, because the company had grown a lot at that stage. And he was studying construction management. And then, yeah, he having a little baby, so he decided that he thought he should stop university too. I'm like, no, I think you should stay at university. And he ended up coming back into the business way sooner than we planned, and has absolutely shone and excelled. And there's that challenge then of filling them up, you know, filling them up with the gaps of what they didn't get if they'd gone out. Yeah, and that's where I think FBA for me and so many other, not organisations, but even consultants have helped us a lot with that as a family, to help fill the children up with leadership and things they may have received outside, because, you know, we're just one little
It's
cell.
hard. There's this feeling of being alone, being unique, being separate. Nobody else understands our pain. Nobody else understands the issues that we face on a day-to-day basis. And of course we are unique, we are all different, but that's where the beauty is, that's the shine, where we are unique. There are similarities across almost all families who are in business. It's just how do we move those little pieces step by step through the process. I really loved your statement about, I think it was Caleb that came in and he shone, and, you know, he should have gone somewhere else. it doesn't always mean, there are terms that are used as very generalised, people should go and learn outside first. But that isn't necessarily the right thing for the individual. So it's really horses for courses. Each person can grow the best of them, and you've been able to bring all the 4 boys into the business. At what stage is it that you and your husband started stepping away in this last few years? Because we're still trying to get to...
Well, 10 years
today.
ago, Carl actually wanted to sell the business, and we're 50-50, and I said, well, it's not a saleable business, and he couldn't really appreciate that. I mean, we had very good profits, but we didn't have a lot of systems, and I said, well, whoever buys this business, they're not going to buy Carl and Jacinta Dowsing. So he took some time off, and we had brought our first non-family leader into the business at that stage, an operations manager, which was always an experience. I don't think any experience is ever really that bad. You learn nothing. We all learn something from everything. So I thought, we can do this, and that's when I think Caleb really stepped up, because Carl just needed to have some time to himself. He was exhausted. He was really, really exhausted. So we then started engaging our first opportunity with consultants regarding succession. I mean, our kids were young. Bowden was probably 21 or 22, I think, at this stage. Yeah, 10 years ago, he's 31. So, and we went through with all the children, as you do. There's a process. And that sort of stalled. It reaffirmed to me that Carl really didn't want to sell the business. He just didn't know what to do next. Yeah. So the little light starts to go off, the green light. And we'd already done a business plan, but we just went on a pretty merry-go-round, to be honest, of engaging consultants, and some of them were good and some of them were great, and eventually we found people, I guess, that gave us the skills enough to start putting systems in our business, or help show us how to do that, to allow Carl. He was the first one to leave the business, so he was tired, and he worked very, very hard, 6 days a week, and was easier. I thought it would be easier for me to be the one that would leave first, but it was actually easier for him, I'm really proud of that, because every day out there on those sites is a different sort of job for us, and he was the master, and he didn't really spend a lot of time in the business once he got off tools. He sort of went to machinery. We sort of branched out into obviously a lot of equipment by that stage, so he found that more enjoyable than being on site with teams all day. And I think it was about 25 admin, or like project managers and stuff in the office at the time when I made the decision. We'd employed a person at that point. So it's a strategy, obviously part of our strategy was that we're going to go out and get a new GM. And went out and we looked. Because I was really just in a night watchman role. I'd come back in after a pretty destructive situation, and a really good friend that I know and care with, and also he's a consultant to us, he said to me, look, really the best person for you to get back in that CEO chair is you. And I'm like, well, really? Is you need someone who's really passionate about the people and the culture. And so with my great time advice. For that, it was great advice, and I'll still really cherish that man today, Simon Bowen. He's a good man and gave me the courage to go and be. I mean, it was a very male-dominated environment, John. You can imagine.
I'm sure.
There's not too many girls out there, lady.
It's okay. I'm from sawmilling. I got a fair idea.
And I was always showing respect. I'm grateful for that, and we have very good values. I think that held us in good stead. But of course, Carl was really up on our farm having some nice time, and he wanted me to be with him. So that was the sort of the stage to consider an external non-family member to come and lead the business. And Bowden was away at a leadership living environment camp, I don't know what you call it, training anyway, and he rang me in the middle of all this and said, Mum, I think I'm ready. I said, oh, I don't really think you are. I think you're it's like, oh. Because it is like your fifth child, you know, and it's actually harder than your children, because in a way, leaving the business has been more difficult, I think, because your children grow up and they have relationships and they leave home. That doesn't happen with your business. It's like, you just I can remember packing up my office and closing that gate for the last time when we made a date eventually when that would happen. And we worked hard about how I would leave the business. It wasn't so hard. We didn't really have a lot of strategy with Carl going. That was sort of like organic. It just occurred, and we had good leaders that could carry through. We had a lot of sons out there on sites, So things were, and we had by that stage had very good middle management to help in those gaps that Carl had done everything. But when it was my time, and then we thought we'd experiment with these two young leaders, co-leaders, one family member, one non-family. And I would have to say it's been one of the best things we ever did. Yeah. So that has allowed me, September 2017, I left. And look, it was a really, really tough. I think the last 3 years in Perth have been, for us have been very, very tough. And we didn't know how tough it was going to stay in the market out there. But I look at them and I think if they can get through that period with what was around them, then they can do anything.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So you're no longer spending day to day, you and your husband are no longer day to day. You've got one family member, Bowden is the oldest, and a non-family member as joint GMs or?
Just, what do we call them?
Joint
stewards,
leaders.
I think we call them, because you're leaders, yeah.
Joint leaders,
yeah.
okay. And the business is growing. Some of the challenges, could you give me a list of challenges? I mean, you've been through it all. You've been through tight money and tight marketplace. And what are some examples that come to mind?
One of our greatest challenges really was people. I mean, people are our soul. You can't lay a concrete footpath without multiple people. And, Carl's tried to do it on his own, and it's pretty tough. It's a lot of work out there. So people and their skill level, like everyone always thinks they've got better skills than they have, and then train them our way. So that would be probably has been our major challenge. It's
interesting that you talk people. Twice earlier you've mentioned values, and I love your company's values.
Yeah, they are too, and I love them. They're the heart and soul of our company. I haven't got to that little part of our life.
The thing that I know about your values is that they are in your words. They're not just 5 or 6 little words that are stuck up on a board. They are statements of intent.
Well, and truly, one of the greatest challenges, if I was to just wind back a little bit before I come into that space, was I thought to be this successful business, which we were clearly, we had to corporatise. So, we go through and we get our values and our
Well, you're not truly corporate. I'd prefer the term professionalise.
Well, back then, I think all I wanted to do was, I thought we needed to be corporatised, absolutely.
Okay.
And it was so wrong. And now to undo that, which was right for us at the time, and look, I think there was definitely some benefits that occurred through that period of growth and those changes that we instilled in that time. But then we're at a FBA conference in, we've done a lot of work. We've been to some interstate seminars, and Carl and I, we've taken the children to some different ones, and it just reiterated to me so strongly how the missing key for us was to do with the people, was the culture, and that was the one thing that is the strength of our company. And when I done our business plan back in 2000, I remember one of the things I wrote was I wanted people to be lining up at the door to work for Dowsing. I think we're really fair people. I think we give a good environment to work in, and Carl's a great leader on site. So we're at this FBA conference a few years ago, and Bill Withers stands up and gives a presentation. And Carl and he very rarely comes to things in the day with me like that, and he was there, and I just looked at him and I said, Carl, that man is the missing piece of our jigsaw. So we engaged with Bill 2018, I think, at the start, and he has certainly, I think, given us the capability for us to be living on a farm an hour out of Perth and our kids be running our business like they are. There's a lot happens with a mother and father or a founder, they're our refounders, but those founders, and I'm not sure we may have got over that gap, that bridge, without someone like Bill Withers in the room with us. We call it our stewardship team, so it's Carl and Jacinta and the leaders, Bowden and Paul, and just everyone wants the same common goal, but there was all these little. We speak about this linguine where it's all mixed up together, and we're slowly pulling it apart. Because that was the other side of our wealth creation, I guess, and our assets, is that everything was all mixed up and our corporate structure wasn't healthy. All that's changed. They're the things you have to evolve through to be where we are today.
It is really a challenge, isn't it? A huge challenge for a founding family to, when everything is tied up, when you want to borrow money, the banks like to take some sort of control or shared ownership, we'll put it that way. And when you step out of the business, then the business is in some ways at risk of not having that capital behind it. And then there's this restructuring and realigning of things into the future. So thank you for sharing that. You've got the values. Are they in that little pamphlet that you have?
I think just one's like when we created these, we spent a lot of time creating them, and I guess always at the driver for what we were thinking about, what we had front of mind was how did Carl and Jacinta, because that's what we want to stay. And if you want a family business to be resilient, you want those values of us to remain in our company. They've got to be in there and lived and stated and clear. And there's Carl, and he says, well, own your stuff ups, or it might have been a little bit more colourful than that to start with, but that is one of our values: own your stuff ups.
I know.
And I'm huge about courage and bravery, and there's some times when I was feeling very insecure, I guess, and having to walk into boardrooms when my husband was out sweating his body out, under a hot sun, and I'm having to go and take a meeting with 6 or 8 senior men that probably were wondering what I was even doing in the room. And you sort of sense that when you walk in there sometimes. And we're talking 15 years ago, 20 years ago. So be courageous, have a crack. Another one, Carl's really, really big about just stand back and look at the job and give a shit. If that was your house, how would you feel? So that give a shit is what I celebrate your work.
This is what I love about your values. They are real, not just to you, but they can be transposed to every single employee and they can understand it.
I think they can, yeah. I think they actually relate to it very.
And that's what gives you this great human resource that can connect with you. They understand what you're saying.
And Bill empowered us to be really true to that. He's a very passionate man, and I love being in any room with him. But also to be able to, when you have a father and a son, and particularly your firstborn son, sitting in a room together, I saw it in farming, and I guess it was a good educator for me to come from a farming background. And so often, my own brother, I have one brother, and he didn't remain in farming because of what was happening for us in those stewardship meetings. They didn't have a
somebody
arbitrator.
in the middle.
Yeah, they didn't have
a little bit of a
communicator.
mediation.
Yeah, and that's exactly the word, the mediator. And I think Bill Withers is a brilliant mediator. We also have Ag Vaca, from KPMG, who's been brilliant on the succession come the corporate, or more the governance and compliance side. I think, I think the cultural work we've done with Bill has really helped. It's helped me leave and be able to sleep very comfortably at night. Yeah,
great.
The trust and for the boys to probably seek us for wisdom, and for me to be able to offer them the trust in them. That was a big thing. To be able to. I don't know if you see that a lot in family business, but when the founders move to the next, to the
trust
refounder.
Trust is critical.
Yeah.
Trust is, it's one of the foundation stones. It's always below the surface. You don't see trust. You can't. It's not tangible, but without it, nothing stands. So trust to me is a foundation stone.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about where things are going in the future.
Well, it's a pretty exciting future. The boys have. There's that little saying, "What got you here is not going to get you there," sort of thing. And I know that so well. Carl and I built a wonderful business. We gave them a great foundation. I think we have a business that's very respected, and it's a very honest business. They've gone out, and diversification was already occurring before I retired from being an active director in the business. That cost us a lot of money, the things we diversified into, but we had foresight, I guess, and Carl seems to be pretty good at that. He'll just think, we've got a strategic plan, but then he'll just have some other little hunch about something, and sure enough, it usually comes into play. So right now, some of the other divisions of our business are performing really well, and there's a lot more infrastructure work in other states than Western Australia. So we currently have a team in South Australia and looking to some work in New South Wales. And our systems are actually so much better. Our management, we've got a good team of management in there. We couldn't have done that 5 years ago. We would have actually fallen over. We would have fallen, whatever we tried to do, I don't think we would have found a way. It would have been maybe a lot more costly or something. But I'm really, really excited about what awaits Dowsing Group as it is today, because we'll definitely be moving,
moving forward, onward and
those
upward.
borders, yeah.
Okay. So have you got some tips for those people thinking about transition in their family business? How to handle their children?
I would say, firstly, I'd say get advice. Like, everyone needs support. Learning, how do we learn? Every opportunity is a learning opportunity, but we're so held back. We're 80% unconscious. Like, there's so much in us that happens unconsciously. So to have other people, obviously, that are experienced and can give you that advice. For me, I probably was already moving through, and I joined a group called the Forum Groups in FBA, which is, what I love about that is you're seeing the insights of so many other people, because family business is very different, and there's so many I can remember in a room in Melbourne at Tony Robbins, and he asked all of us to stand up, and this little exercise was done, and then the statistics came out about family business. I was blown away. That's probably 10 years ago now, 8 years ago, and I was blown away to know the percentage of, globally but also in Australia, of family businesses, and how many, so a lot of this country is...
70% roughly are family businesses in this country,
Yeah, something to be very proud of, to belong to that club. I think that's... but my tips would be, well, clearly for us, our combination was dynamic, and we trust each other to the absolute ends of the earth, so we were very blessed for that. I'm not sure how it would go if you had... There'd be other challenges if you were maybe, partners, non-related partners, and I know that happens successfully too. But I guess that external advice and appreciating that you don't know. Like, that was for me, I accepted that pretty early on, that I didn't know, so I needed help to find out what I didn't know, and I like to know. So I like a fair bit of certainty, and Carl's likes a fair bit of risk.
Okay, hungry for knowledge.
Yeah, and I guess it's the experience of others. I'm open to, and we love people, both of us, so that was easy to be able to, when you connect with people and hear people's stories, and that's really the kaleidoscope of, you just take a little bit from here and a little bit from there, and if I had to give the greatest tip, that would be it, I think, is to seek it out, to seek people who know more than you, or have done stuff before you.
Fantastic. I want to thank you very much for coming along today. I really do appreciate it. Very, very much.
My honour, absolutely.
No, that's great.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, John.
So I want to, in thanking Jacinta Dowsing from Dowsing Group, I want to close today's show. Please subscribe to the show. Click on that little button and subscribe. If you've got any questions, please send me an email, john@johnbruns.com. I'm always happy to answer, and of course, Tech, thank you very much for the sponsoring.
One thing I heard, great show by the way guys, but one thing I heard when you were in there was a talk of courage and how you actually grew, and I suppose this is something I think a lot of business owners, when they start off, has your courage developed, has it grown, how do you see it, putting that into your boys and the self-esteem? And John, the same question for business owners, how important is having courage to back yourself and helping people grow your self-esteem to be successful?
The absolute paramount. And I think, as a young child, I watched my father come over from New South Wales. He's a wool classer. There was a dirt track. I mean, we've seen photos of this. I wasn't obviously alive, but we live, and he cleared the land. He's still on. He's 85. How courageous was he to leave all that security behind? My mum was the oldest of 9 children. She left all her family. I mean, we were modelled courage and bravery. We had to walk to a school bus. I was at a little school with 60 kids. Coming to boarding school, well, how much more brave does that get? You're coming from, from this little remote country town in regional. I think all those things really feed into, because it stacks, doesn't it? And it just becomes, and then we would never be where we are today if both of us had not had the courage. Like, that's what our value is: be courageous, have a crack. And I just think courage for me, I don't know, it's not even to the point of defying whatever, it's just actually that you can. And I had a mum who was very positive. My dad was a bit of a pessimist, really, even though he had all that opportunity to come here. But my mum was always, you can do anything. And a bit traditional, but also, I'd see her write letters to politicians when we were young, or she was very passionate about different things that, so that modelling. And I guess when you have your own children, you know that they're watching. So you have an additional or additional reason to do that. Like, for us, it was actually bread on the table to start with. That's a different driver, I guess. But now it's actually about just how great, how wide, how great, yeah. Because I don't think there's anything there that'll stop us.
John, do you find that in family business, because the children see it around the dining room table, it becomes part of their DNA to be a little bit different than those that aren't in business?
There is some of that. Being the founder of a business or the creator, there's always courage in taking on something where you know you're at risk, and the risk is losing it all. Now, these days, some families who are in business are already into their third and fourth generations, and some of those family members don't necessarily see the risk in the same way as their predecessors, and that will challenge the courage. They don't necessarily see courage in that same vein, is the way that I've seen it. And everyone is different. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about family business. It's also unique. And you will find that courage will skip a generation at times. So sometimes you will find stewards that may not be courageous, but they will be great stewards. And then you will find those that are courageous that don't measure risk. And that can be very dangerous.
Well, I can recall this balance, you've got young developing men, and to not sort of laden them with responsibility, like that, I'm very into independence and responsibility, but I can remember when, as you were just speaking there, remember we were tossing whether to sell the business or not, and I said to Carl, well, how about we ask the two children that are working in the business how they feel about that. And I can distinctly remember it was on our front veranda. It was an evening, and the two that were at school weren't part of the conversation, and they both said, no, we definitely want you to keep it. And Caleb, in fact, said, I wouldn't even be there. He wanted to be a carpenter. He said, I wouldn't even be there if our name was on the front door. So I look at it and I think, what courage did they have? Because at that point they knew we were going to keep that business because they just put their hand up. And I mean, Bowden was at university, he was 21.
And you come from a very male-dominated industry. And I got this picture of here you are walking into a meeting full of men. I know you can't be secretary, but it is a truth. How much did you have to get inside for your own self-esteem? Because I suppose you're walking going, I know what they're all thinking. How much what was it? Did you have to work on yourself to be able to walk into those meetings and hold your own in them? Did that take effort? And how did you do it?
No, I have a very strong faith, so I would pray for some guidance before I go in there. I had beautiful friends, like some very, very good friends who were probably like my personal counsellors through that time that would help empower me to, you've got this sort of thing. But when you go into a room like that and the ones that come back to mind quickly as we're speaking are usually ones that were about conditions of contract or, like where we were getting screwed, really. I'm stand up and say, well, that's not fair. So I'm pretty strong on justice, and that came through, like you find that very easily. I did. I cried once, and I walked out and I thought, I sort of was not ashamed of myself. I was just disappointed that I'd let them get to me in that room, but I was just so emotional, rather than, because when emotion goes up, intellect goes down. So I guess I'd come out of my intellect a little bit but I thought, well, that's real. That's what it's like. We'd been absolutely smashed, and these guys had a lot of power, and that's probably the thing I don't like. I don't like power. I like things to be, we're all equal. We've all got the opportunity, and everyone should have an opportunity, whether you're sick or, we see a lot of young men come through our company who aren't well, and it's really inspiring to be able to help them become, really healthy, stable people. Like I said, there's no apprenticeship. There lacks a lot of discipline in our environment, and I'm really proud of our, alcohol and drug testing. That's changed a lot in the last 20 years in our industry. We don't have it as easy as, when you've got a degree and a CV and So, and look, I think our young men as well in our company, we have tried a few girls every now and again. It doesn't sort of seem to work for them, but our young men, they have to be really brave. They don't know what they're going to get every day when they go to site. They can probably respect in a technical sense, but it's a great gift to have, and I do. And when you say self-esteem, it's so true, because you won't be courageous without that. And so self-care is important. If you don't care for yourself, how are you really going to go and care for someone else? But how are you going to love yourself enough to be the warrior?
John, just a final note, because I'm very conscious of your time here. Around the self-esteem, when you're working with families and you deal with the whole families, from the matriarchs that are running it and developed it all the way through the generations, how do you see it playing out? Are there roles where you know it's important that as part of an advisor, you're trying to build the self-esteem of the younger generation and balance it against the egos, if I can say that, of the older generation?
Self-esteem is one of those critical things that it's a piece of the jigsaw that if it isn't there, you really struggle. As an individual without self-esteem, knowing your place, knowing your boundaries, how comfortable you can be, having the courage, being able to live the values and stand up for yourself and your ideas of the business. So the younger generations, the more opportunity they have to compete on a level playing field. You know, sometimes it's the school sports that can be challenge enough. Sometimes it's the exams that are challenge enough. Sometimes none of the above. Sometimes it's just holding down a job in somebody else's McDonald's store can be sufficient to build a self-esteem. And it's a critical piece of the puzzle. Those people that are adults today that have very low self-esteem, they really struggle, especially in a family of wealth where there's a lot of responsibility to understand what that wealth means and how that wealth is to be handled and worked with. So self-esteem is a critical part, and it's one of the things that I try and identify reasonably quickly within a family group to see if there are gaps.
It's interesting, isn't it? We have an 18-month-old granddaughter, so you see a whole new cycle of that, what we're speaking about, and it's really beautiful being able to mentor her parents, who's obviously our son, because even when you say to a little child, the way you discipline them or encourage them, is actually about nurturing self. That's where it happens. It happens back there. I think when you have, employees or family at 20 or 30, it's a lot harder doing the work then than at 0 to 4 or 0 to 3. So to encourage them rather than, and allow them to explore, allow them to take risk, that's how you feed that soul that becomes independent and is brave or will take risk. Because if you're always worried about I watch her come to our farm, and it's just like the peace, because it's grounding obviously, and there's not it's safe and stuff. But I think when you have freedom, when you're really contained, and there's so much study into that and research, it really enthralls me, but it is so true. And that's where the work needs to get done. It's with our little ones. So bring on Granny.
How perfect.